Good day, everyone. My name is Kenneth Tapia, and I'm with Norel Echanes. For our report, we will talk about the seventh reading, the Analects of Confucius as translated by Edward Slingerland. So basically, this book is an anthology of brief passages that present the words of Confucius and his disciples. It contains descriptions of Confucius as a man and some recounts of his life events. So makita sa reading yung evolving image ni Confucius at ng kanyang mga ideas from the changing standpoints of various branches of the school of thought he founded na matatakil as we go along this report. So in simple words, the Analects is written by Confucius' disciples, which contains advice on various behaviors and moral virtues that people should cultivate if they wish to live in accordance with the way. So according to the introduction of the passage, there were three different versions of Analects circulating in this day. The Lu version of 20 books, the Chi version of 22 books, and the ancient text version of 21 books. So itong version na ito, tinranslate siya ni Edward Slingerland and is based on the Lu version na may 20 books. So for a short background, si Edward Slingerland ay isang Canadian-American professor of philosophy sa University of British Columbia at isang sinologist or sinologist. So a sinologist is someone who studies Chinese language, literature, history, customs, politics, society, etc. ng China. So now we know about the brief background or brief description about the Analects and the translator. Let us know more about Confucius na i-discuss ni Noriel.
All right. So si Confucius, he was born around 551 and died around 479 BCE, around the age of 71 to 72, due to natural causes. Now, the name Confucius is the Latinization of the Mandarin Chinese name Confucius. Ang original name naman niya is Confu, and ang Pinyin romanization naman niya is Confucius or Confu. Confucius was portrayed as a teacher, an advisor, an editor, a philosopher, reformer, and a prophet. So, continuing sa book 1, which has 16 passages. This book contains the basics of self-cultivation, or in other words, the basics of the teachings of Confucius. It emphasizes the importance of character, virtue, actions, wisdom, and compared to knowledge in a subjective manner. All right. So first off, some passages with regards to character. On passage 3 of book 1, it says that a clever tongue and a fine appearance are rarely signs of goodness. The explanation with this is that a person with good character rarely boasts both in words and appearance rather. And then next up we have passage 6, its basic explanation is that yung character is more important than knowledge or wisdom. For virtues, we have passage 11, where the master said that when someone's father is still alive, observe his intentions. After his father has passed away, observe his conduct. If for 3 years he does not alter the ways of his father, he may be called a filial son. Now, ang explanation dito is that obey your parents for as long as you're under them. And once you're independent, you're free to follow your decisions. And then at passage 13, it explains that you should always seek being trustworthy while observing rightfulness and practice reverence. Continuing on, passages when regarding actions and behavior naman. On passage 8, the master said, if a gentleman is not serious, he will not inspire awe, and what he learns will be grasped only superficially. Let your actions be governed by dutifulness, trustworthiness, and do not accept as a friend one who is not your equal. If you have committed a transgression, do not be afraid to change your ways. Pinaka direct explanation dito, or the direct explanation is a person must be dutiful and trustworthy, and that a person must be serious to be taken seriously. At passage 2 naman, we have an explanation na if obedience and goodness takes root from the beginning, then the end would necessarily be good as well. Ayan. And then we have wisdom. Wisdom. On passage 15 is a conversation between Zigong, a disciple of Confucius and Confucius himself. Na in-explain sa atin that self-cultivation is a lifelong endeavor to which a simple goal is to seek positivity and negativity and becoming wise yet humble. On passage 16, the last passage of the book, the master said, do not be concerned about whether or not others know you, or be concerned about whether or not you know others. It explains that do not concern yourself with public opinion, as self-cultivation is self-centered, but be morally able to judge others. Continuing sa book 2, which has 24 passages, the second book focuses more on good governance while tackling the essence of behavior, gaining knowledge, and acting upon such knowledge. The book emphasizes on the different ways of leading people, and as such dives into subjective detail about good governance, politics, and personnel. So passages when it comes to good governance, we have passage 1. One who rules through the power of virtue is analogous to the pole star. It simply remains in its place and receives the homage of the myriad lesser stars. Ayan. Its explanation is a virtuous leader affects their subordinates even unconsciously. So passage 8, Zixia asked about filial piety. And ang explanation sa sagot ni Confucius dito is that true relationships don't only require respect but also requires compassion and affection. Okay. And when it comes to actions and behavior of a leader, we have passage 3, whereas it explains that a leader should correct not just their personality and character, but also their subordinates through virtue rather than punishment and coercion. Okay. When it comes to acquiring knowledge and wisdom, ang passage natin dito sa passage 2, we have the odes number several hundred and yet can be judged with a single phrase. Oh, they will not lead you astray. Ang explanation is there are countless forms of knowledge, yet in general, lahat sila is nag-aim to educate you and help you in your cultivation of the self. Note na yung cultivation of the self here. Yung cultivation of the self here means na studies or the pursuit of knowledge or wisdom. Ayan. Para magkaroon tayo ng generalization. So for passage 12, we have the master said that the gentleman is not a vessel. So one must not only be useful in one thing, but rather be talented in various things, ang explanation sa kanya. And then sa passage 15 is that if you learn without thinking about what you have learned, you will be lost. If you think without learning, however, you will fall into danger. Ang explanation dito is that learning and reflecting upon it always comes in a pair, and does not exist without the other. So whenever you learn, you should always reflect upon what you have learned. Ayan. And then we have book 4, which has 26 passages. This book focuses on the teachings of Confucius that tackles personality and behavior of oneself. The passages mainly contain teachings about how one should primarily behave and view the world. Okay, so for the passages of personality and behavior, we have passage 4 of book 4, whereas the master said, merely set your heart sincerely upon goodness and you will be free of bad intentions. Ang explanation dito, or ang simple message nito is that one should only think of good intentions and the bad intentions would naturally not come to mind. And then at passage 10, we have the master said, with regard to the world, the gentleman has no predispositions or against any person, for or against any person rather. He merely associates with those he considers right. Ang explanation dito, or simple message na pinaportray niya, is one should not be prejudiced and should decide on what they think is right. Lastly, on passage 11, the gentleman cherishes virtue, whereas the petty person cherishes physical possessions. The gentleman thinks about punishment, whereas the petty person thinks about exemptions. A brief explanation, one should only concern themselves with following their way and not otherworldly things. Yeah. And I will pass the mic to Kenneth Tapia for further explanations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Noriel. Now I will discuss the book 12 of the Analects. So this certain book consists of 24 passages and there are a lot of people na na-mention sa book na ito na gustong matuto ng teaching ni Confucius, including yung powerful government figures and both well-known and lesser-known disciples. So included dito is si Yan Hui, na according sa sources ay most favorite disciple ni Confucius. Si Duke ay yung legitimate ruler of Lu, and si Duke of Qi, which is a duke in another nearby state. So among the central theme of this book ay lessons on nature of perfect virtue, or in Chinese term ay Ren, which we also equates to the term goodness, and nature of a leader or how to govern. So whereas, naipakita yung pagkakaiba between sa Confucian rule by virtue at yung mga halimbawa ng personal force and coercive laws sa rule. So next slide, please. So this book started exploration of the nature of the supreme virtue of goodness. Hence, according to exchange of dialogues and passages, strictly adhering to the rules of propriety, following the golden rule, being cautious in speech, and by caring for others, one can be considered as a person living with virtue. For instance, when Yahweh asked about goodness, Confucius replied na by exercising self-discipline and to return or in returning to ritual for just one single day, goodness will prevail throughout the world. So it simply says na if a person strictly adheres to the rule of propriety, he would set an example and everyone would automatically follow. Another lesson na makikita sa passages sa book na ito is following the golden rule. So to note, it was mentioned sa 12.2 na do not impose upon others what you yourself do not desire. So this was after Zhonggang, one of Confucius' disciples, asked him about goodness. So sinabi rin ni Confucius na he should treat people as if they are important guests when he is away from home. So he's implying na one should not allow resentment to enter his or public or private affairs when he is away from home. Moreover, being cautious in speech is a way of being a virtuous person like what he told to Sima Yu, as you can see in the passage 12.3. The master said, the good person is hesitant to speak. Lastly, the latter part of this book includes passages kung saan si Confucius concluded his thoughts na yung nature ng goodness consists of caring for others. So this was when Fan Chi asked him of what is goodness. So natap din sa last passage sa book na ito yung konsepto ng friendship. To note, Confucius said that the gentleman acquires friends by means of cultural refinement and then relies upon his friends for supporting in becoming good. Next slide, please. Yeah, so other central theme of this book is the nature of a leader in governing. So for this part, there were three main sub-themes na emergent. So a leader has no anxiety or fear because he knows he's doing the right thing, brings out the good in people, and gets rid of his his or her own excessive desires. So the first lesson is that a leader who knows he's doing the right thing experiences no anxiety or fear. So to further understand, it was mentioned sa commentary na binanggit ito ni Confucius dahil anxious si Sima Yu dahil at the time si Huan Tui was planning a revolt against Sima Yu's sovereign. So alternately, it was mentioned in the commentary na sinabi ito ni Confucius para marinig ni Huan Tui na at that time nga nagpa-plot ng rebellion. So he believes na Confucius really believes na nakaka-experience at that time si Huan Tui ng anxiety. Second, Confucius mentioned that a leader helps others to realize their good qualities rather than their bad qualities. Ito ay sinabi ni Confucius after itanong ng isa pa sa disciples ni si Confucius na si Zhejiang ang patungkol sa governing. Third, a leader gets rid of his own excessive desires. So what Confucius wanted to point out on this is that the way a leader behaves is the main driver sa kung ano ang nangyayari sa nasasakupan nila. For instance, sa 18th passage of the book, Ji Kangxi or Ti Kangxi was concerned about the occurrence of robbers sa kanyang lugar sa Lu. So si Confucius, sinabi niya na when the common people do something that is not right, it is only because their superiors have lost the way. Hence, we can infer that what Confucius wanted to tell to his disciples is that the root of the problem in a community lies in the hands of the leaders. Next slide, please. So for the fourth and fifth lesson for this book, under the discussion about the nature of a leader, are gaining the trust through virtuous conduct, which is similar to what is taught in the third point, and lastly, living up to the responsibilities. However, for this part, natakil yung usapin ng pagpili sa kung mas mahalaga ba ang pagkain, ang military force, o ang confidence ng tao. So kung papipiliin sa tatlo, according kay Confucius, mas pipiliin niya na hindi isakripisyo yung confidence ng tao dahil para sa kanya, walang halaga yung armaments or military force at pagkain kung wala yung confidence ng common people. Next slide. Now, I will discuss the book 14 of the Analects, which is the last book na na-assign sa reading. So this book conveys lessons on the duties of ruler and minister, how an official should act, lessons that encourage one to focus on self-cultivation, and illustrating the perceptive powers of a gentleman. Next slide, please. So one of the key themes ng book is how an official should act in different situations. So in 14.2, Confucius emphasized that officials should devote themselves to fulfilling their responsibilities toward the ruler and the common people without concern for personal enrichment or career advancement. So this was after Yuan Xi asked about the concept of shame. So Confucius then replied, when the state has the way, accept a salary. When the state is without the way, to accept a salary is shameful. Ayan. So second, Confucius explains that even when bad government prevails, they should continue to act boldly for the common good while speaking cautiously so as to not to draw unnecessary attention to themselves, as we can see in 14.3. So the master said that when the state possesses the way, be audaciously correct in both word and action. When the state lacks the way, be audaciously correct in action, but let one's speech be conciliatory. Third, Confucius stresses the need for officials to be honest and courageous. So, nakita sa 14.22 na tinanong Zilong about yung concept na serving one's Lord. Sinabi ni Confucius, do not deceive him, but oppose him openly. So this was after Zilo asked about serving one's Lord. Next slide. So in 14.26, Confucius said that one should not consider overstepping the bounds of their position. So we can see here, avoid wasting time and energy meddling in others people's affairs. Dahil sinabi ni Confucius na do not discuss matters of government policy that do not fall within the scope of your official duties. So kaakibat nito yung 14.30, wherein Confucius sums up and encourages that one of the attitudes of an official is adapting towards the role. So in 14.30, the master said, do not worry that you are not recognized by others. Worry rather than that you yourself lack ability. Next slide. So this book also highlights the importance of self-cultivation. So to illustrate, in the latter part of the book, Confucius said that cultivating oneself leads to achieving respectfulness and bringing peace to all people. So equally important, Confucius emphasized the importance of moral cultivation than moral prowess. So there was a conversation between Nanggong Kuo and Confucius sa 14.5. So si Nanggong Kuo, tinanong na si Confucius bakit daw yung skillful archer and yung powerful naval commander ay walang enough or hindi nag-end up sa possession of the world, unlike kay Yu and Hogi na nag-introduce ng irrigation and agriculture to people. So this happened in Yellow River. So this leads to the point that the world is won through moral cultivation and civilization rather than moral prowess. Lastly, this book reiterated, or next slide please. Ayan. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So this book reiterated the qualities of an ideal gentleman. So according to Confucius, a gentleman is good, wise, and courageous. So as for him, a gentleman does not worry if he knows he is doing the right thing. A gentleman is not confused as he knows the way things. And a gentleman does not fear as he is not intimidated by physical force or threats, as we can see in the passages 14.6, 23, 27, and 28. So this sums up or in a sense, what Confucius tells about a gentleman. Next slide, please. So for the conclusion, we want to end this discussion by presenting our takeaways while studying our reading. So first, this reading emphasized the value of filial piety. So this value was focused primarily on the father-son relationship, but it also extended to older and younger siblings. And by extension, it includes rulers and their subjects. So si Confucius, he support a strict application of filial piety, saying na his son should not change any practices of the father for 3 years after his death. Also, civil servants were also expected to show filial piety to illegitimate ruler. So filial piety, in a sense, was important enough to even overrule uprightness or doing the right thing in some cases. Next, fondness for learning. According to Confucius, learning should be a lifelong passion, for this is the key to social mobility. So anyone can improve themselves through learning rather than being confined to the social roles they were born to. Third, for humane thought and action or goodness, one should act considerately and correctly toward other people and society at large. So Confucius' teachings show that humaneness can be achieved only through continual self-evaluation and correction. Lastly, sa ideal gentleman, according to Confucius, a gentleman should always be learning and improving. So rather than in learning specialized skills, Confucius' ideal person is a generalist, learning broad principles that govern correct behavior in any situation. So the gentleman should also practice moderation, avoid extremes of emotion behavior, and is acting according to ritual. So to end our discussion, we want to leave you one of the passages in Book 1. Next slide, please. Ayan, according sa Book 1, passage 16, the master said, "Do not be concerned about whether or not others know you. Be concerned about whether or not you know others." And so thank you so much for listening. We're done with our reporting.